this video we're going to be creating the 6x6 inch card front that you can see on the screen. We're going to be learning how to do several different things in Photoshop, including adding clip art onto a design, resizing, adding borders, creating backgrounds using shapes, and also how to remove white backgrounds from images so that you can use it on top of other images without a white square appearing around it. The first thing to do is to open the two graphics that we'll be using in this design. Now these were included free when you purchase the craft course, so if you need help with opening them, then refer back to module 1 where we talk about opening files in Photoshop, and from there you'll be able to watch the video on how to open files. So the first one we're using is called Polly's Pink Flower, and it's of this little girl sat in a flower pot. And the other image we'll be using is called Bella's Flower, which is the dog that you can see here. We're going to be making a 6x6 inch card front, so hit File and New. And then we're going to make sure our measurements are in inches, and we're going to make it 6 inches by 6 inches, and make sure it's 300 dpi, and then hit Create. Now that we've got our square card front, we're going to add in the graphic of the little girl. So I'm going to hit Control and A on my keyboard to select the whole graphic, and then Control and C to copy. I'm going to go over to my 6x6 inch card front and hit Control and V to paste. And you can see that my graphic has now appeared on the card front design. So now that we've finished with this graphic over here, I'm just going to go ahead and close it. Okay, so what we're going to do next is to create a pink background on our design. If you go over to the left where you've got the little squares down the bottom and single click onto that, you'll get a colour picker, so you can go over to the graphic and click on some of the different pinks until you find one that you like. And then click OK. In your layers palette, click on the background layer, and then go over to the fill tool. Make sure at the top here you've got foreground selected in the drop down, and then just click, and you can see that it has filled in a nice pink background for us. Now before we do anything else, I'm just going to go ahead and save this, just so that I've got the main card front saved, and it means I can just hit Control and S every time I do something on the design to make sure we're saving as we go along. I want to add a little bit more white to this design because at the moment the graphic is reaching straight up against the edge, and also there's quite a lot of pink in the background, so I think it could do with a little bit more white around the edge of the graphic. To do that, I'm going to go over to the left, and I'm going to go into the shape tool, right click, and click rectangle tool. I'm going to change my colour to white, and then with the background layer selected, I'm going to click and drag to make a square design. Make sure you hold your Shift key when you make the square to make it perfectly square. If I just let go of my Shift key, you can see that this lets you create rectangles, which means it's not going to be perfectly square. With the Shift key, you'll get your perfect square, which is exactly what we want. So when you're happy with the size, just let go, and you can see this is your square. However, it's not in the middle of the design. So what I'm going to do is just make a new layer by hitting Control, Shift and N, click OK. Then in the layers palette, you've got your new layer selected, right click and click into your rectangle and hit Control and E to merge these. And now that you've merged them, it means that you can move it about a little bit more easily. So I'm going to hit Control and A to select everything, Control and X, which is going to cut out the square we've just done, Control and A again, and the reason I've done it again is that it's going to select my whole 6x6 design, and then Control and V to paste. And what that's done is it's pasted my white square exactly into the middle of the 6x6 card front. So I've got the same space around each of the sides, which makes it look really nice and neat and tidy. Next, I'm going to add a border to my white square. So go to your layers palette and double click on the right of the square to get up the layer style box. Go down until you find stroke in the list and click on that. And this adds a border to the edge, so you can change the size in the top slider, and then you can change the position if you want to. So if you choose inside, it puts it inside the square. I'm going to keep it on outside because that gives it a nice rounded edge, which fits nicely with the rounded edges around the flowers in the design. But what I am going to do is go down to the colour and click, and I'm going to make it a darker pink so that it shows up against the background. Now our design is starting to take shape, but I think the background is maybe a little bit plain, and there's probably something else we can do to make it more interesting. So because the flower pot has these dots on it, I thought it would be nice to add some polka dots to the background of our pink background colour as well. So click on your background layer and then go back into your shapes tool, and this time we're going to select the ellipse tool, which is the circle. And then all you need to do is just click and drag, and then make sure you hit the shift key so you get a perfect circle, and just make a randomly shaped circle there. I don't actually want a white circle because I think that's a little bit too obvious. I want it to be more subtle than that. So I'm going to double click and then take the opacity down, which is going to make it sort of see-through, so some of the pink starts showing through. So I'm going to make that 50 and click OK. And now I'm going to make another circle, a different size. And then I'm going to also make that 50, but rather than going in and typing it, you can just right click on your first circle, copy layer style, right click on your second one, and then paste layer style. Another way to do the circles so that you don't have to keep changing the opacity every time is just to change the colour. So rather than having it white, you can click in here and then click on your first circle, and then it gets that faded pink colour. You can click OK, and then the next circle that you make will automatically, oh, it didn't change the colour. If it doesn't change the colour, like it didn't for me, then double click on the square in the layers palette and you'll get this pop up. Go into other circles and click OK, and then it should save that now, so the next one I make will also be that pale colour. So just go over your background, making as many circles as you want in different positions, make them all the different sizes, and take some time to play about with the positioning so that you're really happy with how they're all looking. Remember to hit your shift key for every circle so that they stay in the perfect circle shape rather than turning into ovals. I'm just doing this really quickly as part of this demo. I'd recommend spending a bit more time on it yourself, just to make it all a little bit neater. But there is our polka dot background. Now if you think back to the original design that I showed you at the start of the video, it had the dog graphic in the bottom right of the design. So to do that, head on over to your dog graphic, hit Ctrl and A to select the whole thing, Ctrl and C to copy, and then go back over to your card front design and Ctrl and V to paste. Now at the moment you can't see the dog, and if you go over to the layers palette you can see why that is. It's because it's sitting beneath the white square, so we can't see it, so we need to move it. So we're just going to click and drag and move the dog right to the top in our layers palette, and now you can see it. So I don't want it to appear that big, So I'm going to click on the Move tool and then Show Transform Controls to bring up a bounding box around the edge. And then I'm going to use the outer outer squares to resize. And again, remember to hold the Shift key down whilst you're resizing. If you don't, then you can see you put it all out of proportion and it doesn't look as good. So hit that Shift key to get it resizing perfectly. Now, because I'm going to put the dog on the right side of the screen, I'd quite like it to be facing the other way so that he looks like he's looking at the little girl. To do that, hit Ctrl and T on your keyboard, and then you can right click inside the dog, and then at the bottom it says Flip Horizontal. So click that, hit Enter on your keyboard, and then that's switched it round for us. So at the moment these graphics have got white backgrounds on them. So if I was just going to leave the dog there, you can see it doesn't really look great because it's got that white square around it. It's covering over the flower pot here and you can't see the background, and all in all it's just a little bit messy. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the white background from the dog so that it better fits with the rest of our design. I'm going to zoom in so that you can see what I'm doing. Scroll down over here. To remove the majority of the background, I can use the Magic Wand tool, which is the fourth one down on your tools list. If it's not showing, you might see a quick selection tool instead. If you see that, just right click on it and then click Magic Wand tool. So if I go over to the dog and click on the white, you can see that it's selected the white of the background here, most of it for me. So I can just go ahead and hit delete on my keyboard and it takes the most of the white background off. So if I just click away from that and zoom out again, you can see already that's looking a lot neater and like it matches in better with the design. However, it's still a little bit messy around the grass. So I'm going to zoom in again. And once more. What we're going to do is we're going to erase all of this grass so that all we're left with is the dog. And the reason we're doing that is it's got lots of little bits of white in it, which are going to be really hard to remove. And also from where we've deleted the white, it's also made our edges around the grass really jaggedy and unpleasant to look at. So rather than try and fix that, which would take a really long time, we're just going to cheat a little bit and get rid of the grass. We're going to use the eraser tool for this, which is nearly in the middle on your tools list. So click into that, and then on the top here you can choose the size of the brush that you want and also the hardness. The hardness is the edge of the brush. So if I just show you on the main dog, if you've got your hardness to 100%, you can see the eraser erases a perfect circle like that with a hard edge on it. If you put it down to 0 and then click, you can see it, rather than doing the hard edge, it makes it more sort of fluffy and gradiented instead. I'm just going to undo that. If I click there again, you can see rather than that hard circle, it's done it a lot more subtly. When I'm erasing something from a design like we're doing with this grass, I normally set the hardness to around about 75%, which I think is a good compromise between the two different versions. For the brush, we want to make it quite small because we're working on a small area here. So I've set it for 18 pixels for now, but somewhere around there should be fine. Now you'll want to make sure you zoom in when you're erasing backgrounds, so that's just Ctrl and plus on your keyboard. And then all you do with the eraser tool selected is just click and drag with your mouse, and that's going to erase the grass as you go. Now if you're very confident with your mouse, then you can do lots of the grass in one go. But what I like to do is do about 5 seconds worth of erasing and then let go with the mouse and then start again with another click. And the reason for that is if I make a mistake, so for example, I go up into the dog and all I need to do is hit undo, and I'll only lose that last little bit of work. If I'd have done the whole thing on one mouse click and then got to the very end and accidentally made a mistake, when I hit undo it would put all the grass back again, so I'd have to start again. So doing it in stages is just a good idea in case you do make a mistake. So I'm just going to go ahead and start removing the grass quite close to the dog, but as you can see I'm not yet going right up against the black, and that's because I'm going to need a smaller brush for that. So do as much as you feel comfortable with your larger brush, and then when you think you've got as close as you can without making any mistakes, go up to your eraser tool and just drag your brush even smaller. And you can zoom in again to make it easier to see what you're doing. And then now you've got a really small brush, you can go right up against the black lines to get rid of that last little bit of grass, but without erasing the black lines themselves, because you want to keep them as they're part of the dog, not part of the grass. So you want to take your time when you're doing this and do it as neatly as you possibly can, because the more time you spend and the neater it turns out, the better your final design is going to look. So I'm just rushing through this a little bit quick, just for this video. If I was doing this for real, I would spend more time on it and make sure I'm really getting all of the grass. But I think that is pretty good. You can see I've still got a little bit in this bit here, so I'm going to need to make my brush as small as it goes, down to 1 pixel. Just to grab that last little bit. Okay, so now when you zoom out, you can see you've got rid of the grass and your little dog is sat there nice and happy, looking much neater. So go ahead and save if you haven't already. And our card front is very nearly there now. I'm going to move my dog a little bit so that that ladybird isn't touching the flower pot. Just move it around till you're happy with it. And that is very nearly a finished design. Now, one of the other benefits of putting the dog in the bottom right corner, and that the flower in its mouth and also its chin have slightly covered over the original graphic of the girl. And this helps with the derivative use definition that we talked about in module 2. So now we've changed this core graphic of the girl because we've added on this flower here on top of it. So someone can't come into our design and just take the girl graphic as it was when you originally downloaded it from inside the course, because you've changed it by adding this flower onto the top. Our design's looking good and it's very nearly finished. However, I think there's one more thing we can do to really tie it all together. So the background and the graphics, just something to finish it off and make it look like that you've put that little extra bit of effort in. And what I'm going to do is add this button from the flower into each of the corners that are left on our border. To do that, find the girl layer in your layers palette and click on it, and then go over to your marquee tool, and then we're going to click and drag so that we've got the button in the flower selected, and then let go with your mouse. Hit Ctrl and C to copy, Ctrl and V to paste, and then if you click your move tool, you can see we've copied everything that was in that square that we selected with our marquee. To To add the button to the edge, we're going to need to erase the rest of the flower that's around it. So we're doing exactly the same technique that we did when we were erasing the grass from the dog. So hit the eraser tool. I'm going to select a slightly bigger one to start with and just go around here. And then as we get closer, I'm just going to make the brush even smaller and zoom in a bit. So again, take your time with this. I'm just doing it a little bit quickly for the sake of this video. So we're just going and erasing everything down to the black outline of the button. There we go. Now, because we're erasing something that was mostly white and we've got a white background, it can be a little bit hard to see if you've actually taken out everything you need to. One trick to find out is to click one layer down from the layer you're working on and then create a new layer and then choose a colour that's quite different to anything that you're working with. So I'm going to choose a blue, click OK, and then with your fill tool just fill in your new layer. And now that I've done that, you can see actually there's quite a lot of bits on the button layer that I've missed. So go back to your button layer, get your eraser tool back out, and then you can get rid of all of those bits that you missed earlier because you couldn't see it against the white background. I'm just going to quickly whiz round and take out some of this white around the edge and get it as close to the black as I can without starting to erase the black. There we go. When you're happy with how it's looking, you can get rid of your test layer just by going into the layers palette, right click and delete layer, which I cannot see. I'm sure it's there somewhere. There we go. Delete layer, yes. And then that's got rid of that blue. So now we've got our button at the top. I'm going to click on the button layer again, and then with the move tool, I'm just going to move it over here. And what I'm actually going to do is hit Ctrl and T to bring up my transform controls, and I'm just going to rotate it a little bit to add it there. Now I'm going to add it to these corners as well. So I'm going to go layer, duplicate layer, OK, and then that's done an exact copy of it, which I can then drag over to this corner. For this corner, I want the button to be facing the other way, so I'm going to hit Ctrl and T again, right click into it, and then flip horizontal and hit enter. So now you can see the buttons facing a different way on that top corner. So then there's just one more to go, so go back to your original button, layer, duplicate layer, OK, and drag it down to your bottom corner. And this one I want to flip vertically so that it's upside down compared to the top button. So Ctrl and T again, right click, flip vertical and enter. And now all of the buttons are facing a slightly different way, which just adds a little bit more interest to the design. So there we have our finished 6x6 inch card front design. So if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and save it, and we will be using this design again in module 4.